Welcome to the War of Jenkins' Ear, a conflict that began not over land, resources, or even honor, but over an ear.
Yes, you read that right.
The year is 1031, and the British merchant Robert Jenkins has just returned to London with a bizarre tale. While sailing near the Spanish coast, Jenkins claims a Spanish warship boarded his vessel, accused him of smuggling, and cut off his ear. The ear, it is said, was later displayed as evidence in Parliament. What could possibly come of such a trivial incident? Plenty, it seems. Most people think that wars are started by powerful nations, driven by grand ideologies or territorial ambitions. They are wrong. This conflict, which would rage for years, was ignited by a single ear, a symbol of perceived British humiliation at the hands of Spain. But here's the twist. The incident was likely exaggerated. British merchants often exaggerated tales of Spanish brutality to gain sympathy and support. Nonetheless, the public ate up the story, and so did the politicians. The British government saw an opportunity to exploit public outrage. They passed a resolution demanding compensation and an apology from Spain. The Spanish government, caught off guard, and not wanting to appear weak, refused. The stage was set for a showdown. But wait, it gets worse. The conflict wasn't just about Jenkins' ear, it was also a proxy for deeper tensions between Britain and Spain, over trade, particularly the lucrative Caribbean sugar trade. In 1739, Britain declared war on Spain. The War of Jenkins' Ear began. The war was a farce, with skirmishes breaking out on the seas and in the Caribbean. British ships attacked Spanish vessels and Spanish forts were besieged, but it was all so chaotic and poorly organized that it seemed more like a series of brawls than a serious military campaign. The British, for their part, were divided. Some saw the war as an opportunity to flex military might, while others questioned its purpose and cost. The conflict dragged on, with neither side making significant gains. Meanwhile, the British public grew increasingly restless. The war was expensive, and the lack of clear victories was frustrating. But the real question on everyone's mind was, when would it end? And would the war ever have started if not for that one ear? As the war raged on, Britain found itself entangled in a conflict that seemed to have no clear end or purpose. But the war's true impact wasn't just on the battlefield. It was the beginning of a larger conflict, the War of Austrian Succession, which would drag Britain into even more complex and costly battles across Europe and the Americas. The War of Jenkins' Ear may have started with a severed ear, but its consequences would ripple far beyond the Caribbean and Spanish Main. So, what was the real turning point? Was it the moment Jenkins lost his ear, or the moment Britain decided to exploit the incident for its own gain? Or perhaps it was the Spanish decision to stand firm and refuse to back down? The war's origins may be comical, but its outcome was serious, shaping the future of European and colonial politics for decades to come. And now, with the War of Jenkins' Ear in full swing, the question remains, will Britain's gamble pay off, or will this bizarre conflict lead to even greater disaster? Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the chaos and consequences of the War of Jenkins' Ear and discover how a single ear set off a chain reaction of events that would reshape the balance of power in the 18th century. In the spring of 1741, as the War of Jenkins' Ear raged on, the conflict took an even more bizarre turn. British privateers, under the guise of protecting their nation's interests, began to attack Spanish shipping vessels with reckless abandon. One such privateer, Captain George Anson, set sail from England with a fleet of 6 ships, tasked with plundering Spanish possessions in the Pacific. But Anson's mission was not just about capturing treasure, it was about making a statement. He aimed to cripple Spain's trade routes and strike a blow against its colonial ambitions. The stakes were high, and the risks were even higher. As Anson's fleet navigated the treacherous waters of the Pacific, they encountered a series of unexpected challenges, from fierce storms to mutinous crews. The turning point came in late 1741 when Anson's fleet arrived off the coast of Chile. Here, they discovered a Spanish galleon, the Nuestra Señora de Covadonga, laden with silver and gold worth millions of pounds. The sight of such wealth was too tempting for Anson to resist. His ships closed in on the galleon, and a fierce battle ensued. Despite the odds, the British prevailed, capturing the galleon and its precious cargo. But victory had come at a cost. The Battle of the Nuestra Señora de Covadonga was a bloody affair, leaving scores of sailors dead and injured. The aftermath was a gruesome sight. Ships destroyed, bodies strewn across the water, and the captured galleon teetering on the brink of sinking. Yet, as Anson's fleet limped back to England, the spoils of their victory were enough to justify the carnage. The news of the raid sent shockwaves through both London and Madrid. The British hailed Anson as a hero, and his exploits were celebrated in newspapers and taverns across the kingdom. But in Spain, the reaction was one of outrage and determination. King Philip V, already embroiled in the War of the Austrian Succession, saw Anson's raid as the last straw. He vowed to crush the British once and for all. As the war escalated, both sides turned to unconventional tactics. The Spanish launched a series of guerrilla-style attacks against British colonies in the Caribbean, while the British sent reinforcements to bolster their defenses. The conflict became a battle of attrition, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But the war also had unexpected consequences for the indigenous populations caught in the crossfire. In places like the Guianas and the Caribbean islands, native tribes found themselves forced to take sides, often against their will. The fighting devastated their communities, leaving them to pick up the pieces in the war's aftermath. As the war dragged on, it became clear that the initial spark of Jenkins' severed ear had ignited a fire that would not be easily extinguished. The conflict began to shift focus from the Atlantic to the Pacific, with both sides scrambling for control of the lucrative trade routes. Yet, the true cost of the war was not just measured in treasure or ships, but in human lives and the stability of the colonial world. So, as the years passed and the fighting continued, a new question began to loom over both nations. Could the War of Jenkins' Ear ever truly end? Or would it drag on, becoming a forgotten chapter in the annals of history, remembered only for its absurd origins and the chaos it unleashed? In the end, the war's conclusion came not with a decisive victory, but with a weary truce. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, signed in 1748, brought an end to the conflict, but it did little to resolve the underlying tensions between Britain and Spain. The war's legacy was one of uncertainty, with both sides left to wonder what the future held. And so, as the dust settled and the stories of the War of Jenkins' Ear faded into history, a new chapter began. Would the nations learn from their mistakes, or would the cycle of conflict continue? The answer, it seemed, lay in the choices yet to come. Stay tuned as we explore the aftermath of the War of Jenkins' Ear and discover how the seeds planted by this bizarre conflict would shape the future of Europe and the Americas.